Ma'am, I need you to step away from the counter.
I'm sorry, what?
Just need to ask you a few questions, won't take long.
Questions about what? I'm ordering coffee.
Someone reported suspicious activity, you match a description.
What description? I'm in business casual buying a latte.
Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again. Step over here, please.
Or what? You'll arrest me for ordering a cappuccino?
The corner coffee shop was moderately busy at 8:47 a.m. on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. The usual mid-morning flow, professionals grabbing their caffeine fix between meetings, students hunched over laptops, retirees reading newspapers by the window. Nobody was paying much attention to the woman in dark jeans and a blazer standing at the counter, scrolling through her phone while waiting to order her usual grande oat milk cappuccino with extra foam. Lucy Smith had ordered that same drink from this same cafe probably 200 times over the past 18 months. The baristas knew her by name. They knew her order. They knew she always tipped well and never caused problems. What they didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was what she actually did for a living. And Officer Harris Whitemore, the 26-year-old rookie cop who was about to make the worst decision of his 14-month career, had absolutely no idea that the woman he was about to detain wasn't just another professional buying coffee before work. Lucy Smith was an FBI tactical specialist. She trained federal agents in advanced weapon systems. She analyzed forensic surveillance footage used in trials that put terrorists and organized crime bosses behind bars. She reconstructed audio evidence for high-stakes federal prosecutions. She supported operations where one technical mistake could get people killed. She had security clearance that most military officers would never achieve. She was one of a small number of women operating in a role historically dominated by men, and she had earned every credential through a competitive pipeline that eliminated over 90% of applicants. But Harris didn't see any of that. He saw a black woman in casual clothes buying coffee, and in his mind, that made her an easy stop. An easy stat for his report, someone who wouldn't push back. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Before we go any further, if you believe that professionalism and quiet competence deserve respect, and that no one should be detained for buying coffee, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This encounter is going to show you exactly what happens when someone underestimates the wrong person. Lucy Smith was 30 years old, and she had already accomplished more for national security than most people twice her age would ever know about. She had been raised in a military family where discipline wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. She earned dual degrees in digital forensics and criminal intelligence, then entered federal service through a competitive selection process that eliminated more than 90% of applicants. She didn't just survive the training pipeline, she excelled in it. Her job wasn't what people imagined when they thought about FBI agents. She wasn't kicking down doors or chasing suspects through alleys. She was building the technical backbone that made those operations possible. She trained agents in advanced weapons handling. She analyzed surveillance footage frame by frame, catching details that others missed. She reconstructed audio evidence that held up in federal trials. She supported high-risk operations where a single technical failure could cost lives. She wasn't flashy about it. She didn't wear FBI jackets or talk about her work at dinner parties. Most days, she looked exactly like what she appeared to be right now, a normal professional woman stopping for coffee on her way to work. And that's exactly why Harris Whitemore felt comfortable continuing this stop. "You were standing near that electrical outlet," Harris said, gesturing vaguely toward the wall behind her. Suspiciously, Lucy's eyes didn't leave his face. "I thought you said someone reported suspicious activity. Now it's about an electrical outlet?" "Both," Harris said quickly. "The activity was near the outlet." "So which description am I matching?" Lucy asked calmly. "The one from the report, or the one standing near an outlet?" Harris's jaw tightened slightly. "Ma'am, I don't appreciate the attitude." "I don't have an attitude. I'm asking you to clarify your legal basis for this stop." "You reached into your bag too quickly when I approached," Harris said, shifting his weight. "That's a safety concern." "I was getting my wallet," Lucy replied evenly, "to pay for the coffee I'm ordering. That's what people do in coffee shops." She was mentally cataloging every word, every contradiction, every shift in his reasoning. This wasn't law enforcement. This was someone scrambling to justify a decision he'd already made without legal foundation. She'd seen it before. studied it in training scenarios, taught agents how to recognize it, manufactured probable cause, post hoc rationalization. It was textbook bad policing. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a college student in the corner booth with their phone angled toward them. Recording. Good. The barista, a young woman with purple hair who'd made Lucy's coffee dozens of times, stepped forward slightly. "Officer, she comes in here all the time, like 3 or 4 times a week. There's really no problem here." Harris turned toward her sharply. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. This is police business. I'm just saying, step back." The barista retreated, hands raised, but her eyes were wide with concern. Lucy watched the entire exchange with professional detachment. She knew exactly what was happening. She'd studied this pattern in civil rights training, in use of force reviews, in after-action reports on misconduct cases. Harris was escalating because his authority had been questioned, and not because any actual threat existed. Then his tone shifted. "Ma'am, you're being very aggressive right now," Harris said, his voice taking on a different quality, wounded, almost defensive. Lucy's eyebrows raised slightly. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't moved toward him. She'd asked direct, calm questions while standing exactly where he'd told her to stand. "I'm asking you procedural questions," she said. "That's not aggression." Harris took a small step backward, his hand drifting toward the radio on his shoulder. "You're making me uncomfortable. I'm going to need backup." There it was, the victim card. Lucy recognized it immediately, the classic pre-escalation tactic. Call for backup to retroactively justify the stop. Create the appearance of a legitimate threat to explain why he'd approached her in the first place, and turn himself into the threatened party. Harris keyed his radio. "Unit 712, requesting backup at Java House on Maple. Uncooperative subject, possible 10 to 15. Lucy's expression didn't change. "I haven't refused anything, Officer Whitemore. I've asked you to explain your legal basis for detaining me. That's not being uncooperative. That's exercising my constitutional rights." His face flushed slightly. She could see the frustration building. His usual tactics weren't working. Most people got nervous when cops called for backup. Most people started apologizing, complying, trying to de-escalate by giving in. Lucy just stood there, calm and composed, watching him unravel. Around them, the cafe had gone quiet. Some customers were filming now, phones out openly. Others watched nervously. A few pretended to focus on their drinks, but their eyes kept darting toward the confrontation. Lucy's federal credentials were in her messenger bag less than 2 feet away. Her badge, her FBI identification. She could end this interaction in 5 seconds. She chose not to. Every second of this encounter was evidence. Every word Harris said, every justification that contradicted the previous one, every escalation tactic, it was all being documented, by his body cam, by witnesses, by multiple phones. She had studied use of force protocols, civil rights law, de-escalation techniques. This was her field, and she knew exactly what policies he was violating in real time. "What specific suspicious behavior did someone report?" she asked. Harris's eyes narrowed. "I already told you. What is the description you're matching me to? Dark clothing, medium build. Am I being detained, or am I free to leave?" "You're being detained for... What crime do you suspect me of committing?" Harris's mouth opened, then closed. He deflected. "Ma'am, you need to stop interrupting. That's not an answer. Under what statute are you detaining me?" "I don't need to explain. Actually, under Terry versus Ohio, you do. Reasonable articulable suspicion of criminal activity. What's the criminal activity?" Harris stared at her. Most people didn't reference case law during traffic stops. Most people didn't know departmental policy. He assumed she'd read about her rights online, maybe watched some YouTube videos. He had no idea she taught this material to federal agents. The cafe door opened. 2 more officers stepped inside, hands near their belts, scanning the room for the threat their colleague had reported. What they saw was a calm woman in business, casual, standing near the counter, and Harris Whitemore looking increasingly agitated. Lucy remained perfectly still, her hands visible, her posture relaxed. 3 body cams were now recording. The evidence was building. And Harris Whitemore still had no idea who he was dealing with. The 2 backup officers who entered the cafe were studying contrasts. The younger one looked ready for conflict, hand hovering near his belt. The older one, whose nameplate read Martinez, took 3 seconds to scan the entire scene before his shoulders visibly relaxed. Officer Martinez had 12 years on the force, and he'd seen enough bad stops to recognize one immediately. A calm, well-dressed woman standing with her hands visible, no raised voices from her direction, no aggressive posture. And Harris Whitemore looking like someone who'd bitten off more than he could chew. "What's the situation here?" Martinez asked, his tone professional but measured. Harris launched into his explanation immediately. Subject matched a description, exhibited suspicious behavior near the premises, reached into her bag in a threatening manner, and has been uncooperative and verbally aggressive throughout the encounter. The words came out rehearsed, like he'd been preparing them in his head. Martinez glanced at Lucy again. She looked about as threatening as a tax accountant. His eyes moved to the other customers, at least 15 people now, half of them with phones out, recording everything. This was already a problem, and it was about to get worse. "Ma'am," Martinez said, turning to Lucy, "can you tell me what happened?" Lucy's response was precise, almost clinical. "At 8:47 a.m., I was standing at the counter waiting to order when Officer Whitemore approached and asked me to step aside. When I asked for the reason, he stated someone had reported suspicious activity and that I matched a description. When I asked what description, he changed his justification to standing near an electrical outlet suspiciously. When I noted the contradiction, he changed it again to reaching into my bag too quickly. I asked him to clarify his legal basis for the detention. He became agitated and called for backup, describing me as uncooperative despite the fact that I haven't refused any lawful order or made any threatening movements." Martinez's concern deepened with every word. Normal people didn't give accounts with timestamps. Normal people didn't use phrases like legal basis for detention or reference specific details in chronological order. This woman had training, serious training. The crowd had grown. 20 people now, maybe more. In the corner, Martinez noticed a young woman with her phone propped against a water glass, clearly live streaming. The view count was climbing. This wasn't just being recorded, it was being broadcast in real time. Lucy made her decision. It was time to end this, but it had to be on her terms, the right way, the way she'd trained countless agents to handle potentially volatile situations involving armed individuals. "Officer Martinez," she said clearly, "I'm going to reach into my bag for my identification. Is that acceptable?" It was a textbook de-escalation technique. Announce your intentions, request permission, and remove any ambiguity that could be misinterpreted as a threat. Martinez recognized it immediately because it was exactly what police academies taught officers to encourage from civilians. "Yes, ma'am, go ahead," Martinez replied. Lucy's hand moved slowly into her messenger bag. Her movements were deliberate, visible, telegraphed. She wasn't fumbling or rushing. She withdrew a black leather credential case and held it at chest level where both officers could see it clearly. "My name is Lucy Smith," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent cafe. "I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, assigned to the Tactical Operations Division." Harris Whitemore's face went through several colors in rapid succession, red, white, then a sickly gray. His body froze mid-breath. Every ounce of confidence, every bit of authority he'd projected for the past 15 minutes, evaporated in an instant. Martinez's eyes widened. His posture shifted immediately to something more formal, more careful. This wasn't just bad. This was career-ending bad. Lucy continued, her tone still calm but now carrying unmistakable authority. "I'm a tactical specialist. I train federal agents in advanced weapon systems, conduct forensic surveillance analysis, and support high-risk operations." She opened the credential case, showing her badge and identification card. Martinez took the credentials, examining them closely. They were legitimate, current, the kind of federal clearance that most military officers would never achieve. The photograph matched. The holographic security features were authentic. This wasn't some mall security guard flashing a badge. This was a senior federal law enforcement officer. "I've been documenting this interaction from the beginning," Lucy said, her eyes moving between both officers. "I haven't interfered with Officer Whitemore's investigation because I wanted to see his process." The implication hung in the air like smoke. She hadn't just been a victim in this encounter. She'd been evaluating him as a professional, watching him fail every basic standard of constitutional policing. Harris found his voice, though it came out weak. I was just following protocol. Which protocol? Lucy's response was surgical. The one where you change your justification 3 times, or the one where you call backup because someone asks procedural questions? Because I teach use of force and civil rights law to federal agents, Officer Whitemore. And nothing about this encounter followed any protocol I'm aware of. Martinez stepped in quickly, damage control instincts kicking in. Agent Smith, I apologize for this situation. I don't need an apology, Lucy said, her voice cutting but not loud. I need to know if I'm being detained or if I'm free to go. Martinez understood the trap immediately. If they detained an FBI agent without probable cause, this became a federal incident. If they let her go, they were admitting the stop had no legal foundation. Either way, Harris was finished. The only question was how much damage he'd take the department down with. You're free to go, ma'am, Martinez said. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. Lucy didn't move. I want badge numbers, names, and the incident report number. Martinez provided everything without hesitation. Badge number. Full name. His partner's information. He was already thinking about the report he'd have to write, the conversation with the lieutenant, the internal affairs investigation that would inevitably follow. Lucy turned to Harris. Officer Whitemore, I'll need your badge number as well. Harris mumbled the numbers, barely audible. Lucy typed everything into her phone, added a timestamp, and saved the note. This interaction has been recorded by multiple civilians in your body cams. I'll be filing a formal complaint through official channels. The barista appeared at the counter, holding a to-go cup. Your coffee's ready, hun. It's on the house. Thank you, but I'll pay for it, Lucy said, pulling out her card and completing the transaction. Even now, she maintained her professionalism. No dramatic exits, no raised voice, just a woman paying for her coffee. She walked out of the cafe with the same calm, unhurried dignity she'd maintained throughout the entire encounter. Behind her, Harris Whitemore stood frozen, knowing with absolute certainty that he'd just destroyed his career. Martinez was already on his radio, calling for a supervisor. Around them, phones were still recording. On TikTok, the video had already been shared 3,000 times with a caption that would define the narrative. FBI agent racially profiled while buying coffee. Harris's fate was sealed before he even made it back to the station. Within 4 hours of Lucy Smith walking out of that coffee shop, the Internal Affairs Division had opened a formal investigation. The trigger wasn't just Lucy's official federal complaint, though that alone would have been enough. It was the convergence of multiple factors: bystander complaints filed online, video evidence spreading across social media, and a phone call from the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility to the police chief that made it clear this wasn't going away quietly. Captain Sarah Chen drew the case. She was an 18-year veteran of the department with a reputation for being fair, but absolutely thorough. Chen had investigated officers before, and she had no tolerance for civil rights violations. Her philosophy was simple. Bad cops made every good cop's job harder and more dangerous. She treated misconduct investigations like bomb disposal, careful, methodical, and with full awareness that one mistake could destroy everything. Her first step was reviewing the body cam footage from both Harris and Martinez. What she saw made her close her office door and watch it 3 more times, taking detailed notes each time. Harris's justifications shifted like sand. Suspicious activity became proximity to an outlet, became reaching into a bag too quickly. Lucy's questions were textbook constitutional challenges, the kind taught in police academies as examples of informed civilians exercising their rights. Harris's victim-playing language was obvious once you knew what to look for. You're being aggressive when the subject was calm. You're making me uncomfortable when he was the one with the badge and gun. The complete absence of probable cause was damning. Chen had supervised hundreds of legitimate investigative stops. This wasn't one of them. She pulled Lucy Smith's federal record next. It took 2 phone calls and a formal request. But what came back was impressive. Highly decorated, exemplary service record, multiple commendations, advanced tactical certifications. This wasn't someone pretending to be federal law enforcement. This was a senior specialist with credentials that most cops would never achieve. Then, Chen pulled Harris Whitemore's personnel file. 7 citizen complaints in 14 months. That number made her stomach sink. 7 complaints for a rookie officer wasn't just unusual, it was a screaming alarm that everyone had ignored. All 7 had been dismissed by his supervisor without serious investigation. Chen looked at the demographics of the complainants. 6 of the 7 were people of color. The pattern was impossible to miss once you looked for it. She requested every piece of body cam footage from Harris's shifts over the past year. What arrived 2 days later was even worse than she'd feared. 47 investigative stops in 14 months. Chen spent 3 days reviewing every single one, categorizing, documenting, building spreadsheets. The numbers told a story that made her furious. 34 stops, 72%, involved people of color in a district where the population was only 35% non-white. 29 stops involved women, 22 involved black women specifically. And the real kicker, 0 arrests, 0 citations. Every single stop ended with subject cleared. Harris Whitemore wasn't doing law enforcement. He was using his badge to harass people, particularly women of color, in ways that would be difficult to prove as misconduct without the kind of comprehensive analysis Chen was now conducting. His justifications repeated across cases like a script. Matched a description appeared 23 times, suspicious behavior 31 times, officer safety concern 19 times. The language was careful, designed to sound legitimate in a written report while masking what was really happening. But the systemic failure went deeper. Chen discovered that Lieutenant David Thompson had rubber-stamped every single complaint dismissal without conducting meaningful investigations. A standard investigation would include reviewing body cam footage, interviewing witnesses, checking for patterns. Thompson had done none of that. When Chen dug into Thompson's background, she found that he and Harris attended the same church, socialized outside work. The dismissals weren't just lazy supervision, they were active cover-up. Chen began tracking down previous complainants. Most were reluctant to talk at first, scarred by an initial complaint process that had gone nowhere. But once they understood this was a real investigation, their stories emerged. They were eerily similar to Lucy's. Polite initial stops that escalated when they asked questions, shifting justifications, Harris playing the victim when challenged. One woman, a 28-year-old teacher, described being stopped while walking her dog. Another, a college student, was questioned while waiting for a bus. A third was detained while leaving her gym. "Why didn't you pursue it further?" Chen asked each one. The answers varied, but the themes were consistent. They didn't know how to fight it. They didn't have resources for attorneys. They feared retaliation. They didn't think anyone would believe them over a police officer. Some had tried to file complaints and been discouraged by the desk sergeant. Others had filed complaints that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. Lucy Smith was different. She had federal backing. She had extensive legal knowledge. She had documented everything with the precision of someone trained in evidence collection. And she had credentials that made it impossible for the department to dismiss her as just another complaining civilian. Lucy filed her complaint through 2 channels simultaneously: the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility and a private civil rights attorney named Marcus Freeman. Freeman specialized in federal civil rights cases against law enforcement with a track record that made police departments nervous. 23 successful cases, $47 million in total settlements. He knew exactly which pressure points would make a city's legal department recommend settling fast. The federal complaint cited violation of civil rights under color of law, a specific statute, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, that carried criminal penalties. Though Lucy wasn't on duty during the encounter, Freeman added a claim for interference with a federal officer, arguing that her off-duty status was irrelevant to her protected federal position. The lawsuit filed in federal court demanded $2 million in damages, $500,000 compensatory for the violation itself, $1.5 million punitive to send a message, and injunctive relief requiring specific policy changes within the department. The local news picked up the story within 48 hours of the lawsuit being filed. FBI tactical specialist detained while buying coffee ran as the lead story on 3 evening broadcasts. The body cam footage, released through Discovery, went viral. 20-second clips showed Harris changing his justification mid-encounter, showed Lucy's calm demeanor, showed the moment she revealed her credentials, and Harris's face went pale. Public reaction was swift and loud. Protests formed outside the police station. The city council scheduled an emergency meeting. The mayor, facing re-election in 8 months, publicly called for accountability and transparency. The department's initial defensive stance, claiming they needed to review all evidence before commenting, shifted within a week to carefully worded statements about taking these allegations seriously and investigating thoroughly. Harris Whitemore was placed on administrative leave with pay, which was standard procedure during investigations. Lieutenant David Thompson was also placed under review for negligent supervision, though his case moved more slowly through the system. The machinery of accountability, so often slow to start, was now running at full speed, and Harris Whitemore was directly in its path. 4 months after a routine coffee stop became a federal incident, the settlement negotiations reached their conclusion. The city's motivation was transparent to everyone involved: avoid trial, avoid additional publicity, and most importantly, avoid the discovery process that would expose decades of complaint mishandling and systemic failures. A trial would mean depositions, subpoenas, internal memos becoming public record. The city's legal team had done the math, and the numbers weren't in their favor. The initial settlement offer was straightforward: $2 million to Lucy Smith, Harris Whitemore's termination, Lieutenant Thompson's forced retirement with full pension, no admission of guilt, and sealed settlement details. It was the standard playbook: pay the money, remove the problem officers, move on quietly. Lucy refused. Her attorney, Marcus Freeman, walked back into negotiations with a counteroffer that made the city's lawyers uncomfortable. Lucy would accept the $2 million, but she had conditions. The settlement amount had to be public. The body cam footage had to remain in the public domain. The department had to implement specific, measurable reforms with defined timelines, and there had to be an external monitor with enforcement power for 3 years to ensure compliance. No sealed details, no confidentiality agreements, full transparency. The city pushed back hard. Confidential settlements were standard practice, they argued. Public details would encourage copycat lawsuits. The reforms were too expensive, too extensive, too prescriptive. Freeman's response was simple: go to trial, and discovery will expose decades of dismissed complaints, patterns of racial profiling, and supervisory cover-ups. We'll depose every officer who served with Harris, every supervisor who dismissed complaints, every city official who approved the policies. By the time we're done, this $2 million will look like a bargain. The city's attorneys did another calculation. A trial would cost millions in legal fees alone. The publicity would be devastating during an election year. And if they lost, which seemed likely given the evidence, a jury award could be triple the settlement demand, with no control over what became public during the process. Lucy got everything except a formal admission of guilt, which the city's insurance required they refuse. When the settlement was announced, Lucy released a statement that Freeman tried to soften, but she insisted on keeping exactly as written. This isn't about me. It's about the hundreds of people who were stopped and didn't have the power to fight back. The money is secondary to the reforms. The reforms are what will prevent this from happening to someone else. Harris Whitemore's termination became effective the day the settlement was finalized. The termination letter cited 5 grounds: unlawful detention, false reporting, pattern of civil rights violations, misuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His peace officer standards and training certification was revoked by the state, meaning he couldn't work as a police officer anywhere in the state regardless of which department might consider hiring him. Harris attempted to control the narrative on social media, posting that he was being scapegoated for following his training and that the department had abandoned him for doing his job. The posts were immediately flooded with clips from the body cam footage showing his contradictory justifications, his victim playing, his complete lack of probable cause. He deleted his accounts within 48 hours, but the screenshots had already spread. No police department would touch him. His law enforcement career was over at 27 years old. Lieutenant Thompson was forced into retirement at 52. He kept his pension. The union had negotiated protections that were nearly impossible to override. But his career ended in disgrace. The 47 complaints that had been rubber-stamped under his supervision were all flagged for review. Captain Chen personally reopened 12 of them where the evidence suggested clear policy violations. 4 additional cases resulted in settlements totaling $680,000. The city paid, and each settlement included the same transparency provisions Lucy had demanded. The reform requirements were extensive and specific. Mandatory bias training became quarterly rather than annual, with external facilitators and testing to ensure comprehension. De-escalation training was expanded to all officers with scenario-based assessments. Body cam footage would be subject to automatic random review by a civilian oversight team. The complaint investigation process was overhauled with strict timelines and mandatory supervisor accountability. Any supervisor who dismissed a complaint without proper investigation would face disciplinary action. An external civilian review board was established with subpoena power. An early warning system was implemented to flag officers with complaint patterns before they became Harris-Whitmore-level problems. Lucy Smith declined every interview request, every invitation to speak at rallies, every opportunity to become a public figure. She returned to the FBI field office and resumed her work training agents, analyzing surveillance footage, supporting tactical operations. When colleagues congratulated her, she deflected. "I did what anyone should do, demanded accountability," she told one persistent reporter who caught her in a parking lot. "That's not heroic. That's baseline." She donated the majority of the settlement to a civil rights legal fund that provided representation for people who couldn't afford attorneys like Marcus Freeman. She kept enough to cover her legal expenses and set aside a small amount for her niece's college fund. The rest went to fighting similar battles for people without federal credentials and security clearances. The following week, she walked back into the same coffee shop. The barista looked up, smiled with visible relief, and asked, "Your usual?" "Yes, please," Lucy said, and paid with her card like she always had. Normal restored. Exactly what she wanted. The case became a teaching tool nationally. The FBI incorporated it into civil rights training for new agents. State legislators in 3 states referenced it when proposing police reform bills. 12 police departments in other cities voluntarily adopted similar oversight policies, hoping to avoid becoming the next cautionary tale. News articles analyzing the case focused on a simple truth: documentation is power, and systems only change when their failures are exposed publicly. Lucy's legacy wasn't the lawsuit or the settlement amount, it was the precedent it set and the message it sent. Professionalism doesn't excuse prejudice. Authority requires accountability. Justice is possible, even against entrenched systems. And you don't need to raise your voice to demand dignity. You just need to refuse to accept anything less. 6 months after the settlement, Lucy stood at the front of a training room at the FBI field office, teaching a class of new tactical specialists. Her lesson that morning covered proper conduct during civilian interactions. "Never assume you know who you're dealing with," she told them. "Treat everyone with professional respect, not because they might be federal agents or lawyers or city council members, but because it's the right way to do the job. It's the only way to do the job." A young agent raised his hand. "But what if someone doesn't cooperate? What if they're difficult?" Lucy's answer was immediate. "Then you better have legal grounds for what you're doing, because one day, someone will have the knowledge and resources to hold you accountable. Do it right from the start, every single time, and you'll never have to worry about that day coming." She dismissed the class and walked to the break room. Someone had made fresh coffee. She poured a cup, black, and headed back to her desk to review surveillance footage for an ongoing operation. The whole event ended exactly as it began, with coffee, professionalism, and the quiet power of someone who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Thank you for watching till the end. If you believe that everyone deserves to buy their coffee in peace and that those who abuse power should face consequences, go ahead and smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you think should happen to officers who profile innocent people. And subscribe so you don't miss our next upload, because we've got more stories of people who stood up, fought back, and 1. Remember, you don't need to be an FBI agent to demand dignity. You just need to know your rights and refuse to back down. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and keep holding the powerful accountable.